Once upon a time, there were three brothers, known as the Trinity Bros, who told stories of opinions of MMOs.
Now it's time for our storyline quest. Time for some Trinity Bro opinions with our storyline quest. It's the Trinity MMO show. All right, that was our quest, daily quest. Now we're into the next section. There was an article out of MMORPG.com. It was an opinion piece, okay? And it was talking about the last AAA game being released in the MMO world. Obviously, we've had games come out that are online games, MMORPGs that are not AAA games. You know, Black Desert Online is not a AAA game. Okay, so apparently they classified the last AAA game to come out was in 2014. It was WildStar, which, by the way, is offline. Okay, so people are talking about the fact that what happened or where are all the big AAA games? I mean, yes, we have Elder Scrolls Online keeps putting stuff out all the time. With regards to their different contents, we also see it happening. If you can argue whether or not Destiny 2 is a MMORPG, Final Fantasy constantly going new patches, WoW constantly new patches, but no real new titles. Even the ones we're anticipating coming out, I think like Crowfall, Camelot Unchained, even Ashes of Creation are smaller titles. So I wanted to throw it out there. The process is why we haven't seen a AAA game since 2014 WildStar. Solomon, what are your thoughts about why the drought?
Then I would ask, what was their definition of AAA then?
That's a good question. What is the definition of AAA?
Because like if their argument is AAA has to be like an established company, say whoever made WildStar, like I would beg to differ, just because like I mean we have so many AAA companies in South Korea. I mean, Black Desert Online, I would argue, is considered a AAA title. Star Wars: The Old Republic, I believe, I'm pretty sure it came out after WildStar did. So I'm a little
Okay.
confused about that statement. You know what I mean?
What is Wikipedia? Wikipedia calls AAA. It is a games produced and distributed by a mid-size or major publisher, typically having higher development and marketing budgets.
Yeah, and they're gonna say that the last AAA title in terms of MMO is WildStar. I have a very hard time believing that. Like Kakao Games may not be that known here in the West, but they're getting traction, but one in South Korea, they're like the biggest. They're like the biggest name right now, right? So then again, it's just like I'm not trying to dog on them. I'm not making fun of them.
That's fine. No,
I'm just trying to get where their definition of AAA is. So, but I
that's
mean,
a fair statement.
So with that being said, I mean, let's just assume that their statement is true, and the last AAA MMO title was WildStar. I would say that it's a bigger trend amongst indie developers, because as I've been making my news videos, especially this past year, I've been seeing a lot of 1 to 2 man studios, I put that in quotes, group of people making their own games out there. They'll oh, hey, thank you for the subscription, Rezos. I do appreciate it. Sorry. Um, I'll get back to you in a minute. Hang on. Let me finish my thought here. But what was I saying? Oh yeah. So again, you're seeing a lot of develop, and this isn't just for MMOs or online games. This is just for gaming in general. I mean, we saw the huge success with Stardew Valley, and that game is only made by one person. Before him, there was a side-scrolling adventure game called Mungie or Dust. That was a huge success. And now you're seeing a lot more MMOs being developed by, again, a person of 1 or 2 people, or even 3. We're getting that steampunk VR MMO that is based in San Francisco. I know you guys heard of that, but I can't remember the top of my head what the name is called. Matter of fact, I can't even recall any of the names of these smaller studios that are making indie MMOs, unfortunately, because it's just I present it, and then I unfortunately just forget about it. But it's more than just 1 or 2. It's actually, I would even argue that it's actually more than just a dozen, because if you actually look at some of the games being developed even within the Steam and Epic platforms, you're going to see a bunch of people in there trying to make their own game. Again, not just MMOs, but just their games that they want to play, and various RPGs. And not to mention, we also have crowdfunding, but that's an entirely different beast. topic of its own, because we could talk about like the pros and cons, and cons being the likes of Star Citizen, and but we also had a lot of success as well. And so yeah, it's a mixed bag. Even if we don't get the AAA experience, the experience still continues because it just shifted who's making them. And
Yeah.
in my opinion, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Would I like to see both? Absolutely. I do gravitate towards the AAA experience. I'm not gonna lie. I do like having a giant team behind the game that I make. Because even though that doesn't necessarily guarantee a real polished game, the odds of it being fixed, or the odds of the game itself being just being playable at the end of the day, is just a lot greater than somebody who's just making a game on its own, on his or her own, because it's just sole responsibility of that one person that's making it, that has to put on different hats of the development of the game, and that could be very strenuous and very stressful. So, but again, that's not to say that I'm against or wouldn't play indie games, much less indie MMOs. So yeah, that's my spiel. But again, the premise of this, of the argument that we haven't seen a AAA title since WildStar, I'm a little, I'm very skeptical of that statement.
Well, it does play into what is AAA games and what that listing is. I mean, it could be the big number names like we think of like EA, Blizzard, um, Bethesda, BioWare. I mean, these big game companies, and we've seen a lot. Like I said, you mentioned a lot of small community. I mean, I kickstarted Ashes Creation, okay,
Right.
Camelot Unchained, Crowfall, Sea of Titans, or City of Heroes. There's a lot of small games out there that are definitely being built and developed, and they're not AAA games, but they're not looking to be WoW killers. And you mentioned a very good point that Korea has a ton of titles, and but they're not easily ported over into the Western. They are doing them. There's been some interest in them, but there's also again a smaller niche. Blackers Online is a bigger game, bigger title that actually did something. I mean,
Oh,
I know Arcade was an example of what's ported over by Tryon Worlds. Kind of had its issues. We also seen Bless and Bless Unleash, right? So there have been those games out there. But I think it's like your point about that these smaller companies, smaller titles. I mean, I think that because they're not shooting for WoW.
right. If I may, just one more thing
Yeah, go
too.
ahead.
Now that you mentioned Korea, I forgot to add. Again, when it comes to the triple A definition, again, I would argue companies like Tencent is probably even bigger than EA in a lot of ways, right? Because their market, even though it's not in the U.S., the overall, again, and this is something that we talked about privately, is the cash on hand that the company is capable of. Like Microsoft, I think it's up there. I think they're all probably on the same level as Microsoft, if not greater. Um, so yeah, I think again, I guess it just depends on which region we're talking about and the definition of AAA itself. So
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because we're going to talk about article, a PAX panel, and the whole idea of WoW killers. And I think if you're trying to shoot for, as to be a WoW killer, you're never going to get there anymore.
right,
And I think that probably smaller titles are being, they understand you can make it in the niche market. Dark Age of Camelot, first game I played, back in 2004, I think it was owned by Mythic Entertainment, which ended up becoming part of the EA empire at one point, but then it sold off to a smaller company. They make what, 100,000 subscribers on a given, and so, but they make money. They're still okay. They're still making content because it's enough to keep it going. EVE Online is a good example of a smaller niche company that is making its money and
true.
still working its way. I was thinking about the fact that one of the articles I thought about bringing out today was a game called Cross Out, because there was like an article about hey, they have this circus thing coming in, or I go, what? What is this? Cross Out is a new team-based multiplayer vehicle combat game. All right, okay, so
It looks fun though. I
I
will admit it
know
does look fun.
I'm thinking Rocket League, but it's an MMO.
I think it's probably the engineering inside you that's talking.
Well, I mean, I'm not. I hate because the problem with Rocket League is it's very hard to control the vehicles. Okay, but it does look interesting. Anyways, so Jazzio, what are your thoughts about this whole the drought? Maybe there isn't a drought.
Well, I think for me, I have a very complicated web of different thoughts going on when I read that article, and many different ways to approach it. And I do I agree with Solomon here that I don't believe that WildStar was the last AAA game, MMO game released. I mean, there's been other games released by medium size and large companies, well known companies, as a matter of fact. That I would say that WildStar was definitely one of the ones that sticks out because it was so promising because it was such a unique take on an MMO at the time.
Yep.
There had been sci-fi stuff done before. There was Star Wars Galaxies, love it or hate it. There was Anarchy Online before that.
Oh,
Not
that's
too
right.
right, not too far before that. I've played all
That's an
three of
older
those
one.
games. Oh yeah, I'd actually wonder if there's any private servers for that. I wouldn't mind going and playing it again now that I mentioned it. WildStar was a great game and it had a lot of promise, and I actually thought it was going to do really well, and for whatever reason, people just stopped playing rather rapidly,
Right.
and it was empty. I think that part of the issue was the change in what the players wanted. That World of Warcraft and other games, Guild Wars 2 when it was released, and Elder Scrolls Online tended to get more user friendly and new player friendly. You could get in and learn the game rather quickly. WildStar was a little bit more complicated, and the end game was intense. It was not. You didn't do end game content uh, unless you were with a group of friends and you all knew what you were doing. Like it was really difficult, and they wanted it to be that way. They wanted the end game to be challenging, and unfortunately, especially in North America, we tend to have an audience that didn't want it to go that direction. They wanted it to become easier over time, and they were able to get that feel from the other games that we mention on here consistently.
Right.
And that's another thing that we were talking about Mike Morheim at the beginning, and he just had that interaction with some of his ex coworkers, about how the game there just aren't any real games out there anymore that give you that challenge and give you that idea of accomplishment when you do something in the game that really matters. That I worked. I think about this was during the Burning Crusade. They had those mounts, which I'm trying to think of the name of them right now, but they were the Drakes, and it literally took a month of doing 3 quests every single day, 7 days a week, for a whole month to complete that quest line in order to get your Drake. And there was another that was like a flying manta ray looking type creature that was also a mount in the Burning Crusade that you can get. It also took an entire month. And boy, when you completed that, you turned in that last thing, and that NPC said, "Okay, now go talk to the handler and pick your color, which color you want." And you could only pick one. When you got that mount and you clicked that button and your character popped up on top of that mount, it felt like God just opened the gates of heaven for you because it was that big of a moment for you. And a lot of these games just tend to not have that anymore. It's almost like you just put your quarter in, your subscription, and you do a couple things and you can get all of those things handed to you almost. Now, money would obviously come into this. If you're a business, you've got to be able to pay your employees. You want to be able to pay yourself. You want to be sustainable financially into the far future. And right now, especially like you said, Kennethan, if you're looking at it like, oh, we want to be the WoW killer, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. You're going to fail. You need to do something different, but someone's going to go, yeah, but you just said WildStar was different, and it's gone now. It's gone. So how can you say that? Well, honestly, I'm going to tell you, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because there are games being worked on now, Star Citizen, and some others that are different. And I mean, they're
That's a AAA game.
sure you could go No Man's Sky and stuff like that. I guess you could throw that in there, but and do we know how successful that they're going to be, and how, like, No Man's Sky, is it very successful? Well, it depends on your definition of success, which we talked on the show before. I believe we covered that before. Seems like we
Sounds
have, but
familiar. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, but for the big businesses, if we're talking AAA, and if we're going to go by, like you just described, the Wikipedia, Webster's Dictionary version of what makes a AAA company, those big companies like Microsoft, Amazon, and NCSoft, and I was going to mention some of the Asian companies. They're looking to make a profit, and if they look at what the development studio is bringing to them, and they look at it and they think, okay, but what's your business model? What are we going to do with this? Like, is it going to be subscription based? Are we going to have a shop? Are we going to have all these other things? Like, that they want to know that they're going to make good money. And unfortunately, in this capitalistic system, you know, there are going to be greedy people that are going to say, I don't want to just get by. I don't want to just do okay. I want to be like Jeff Bezos. And unfortunately, there are people like that that are leading some of these companies. And I think that's a lot of the turnoff, is that they feel like they see things like WildStar happen. And they see things like these games that are in limbo that have been in development for a decade now, literally. And they're like, that's just money pouring out my pocket. And if I am not going to see not only a return, but
Yeah.
I'm going to be able to afford like the top of the line Tesla and a mansion and, marry a supermodel, then, it's an unfortunate thing that we have to talk about
Right.
it, but
It's
it
also
does play a
reality
part in
too.
it.
I mean, I'm
Right.
going to read up on the article itself, the guy's opinion. Okay, I mean, it's obviously, instead of focusing on true MMORPGs, most major studios have shifted towards chasing the flavor of the month. A MOBA, hero shooters, battle royales,
Kinda
mobile games, or lobby-based pseudo MMOs. The latter two have likely done the most damage to the MMORPG market because many of these games have been highly successful, and they've taken up significant amount of development resources from prominent studios. Publishers like EA or Epic Games are raking in tons of cash for Apex Legends and Fortnite. There's no reason for them to develop a new MMORPG, which would cost significantly
True.
more to develop and target a smaller audience. Instead, they've already grabbed the attention of online gamers and have mostly been able to keep it through small updates while heavily monetizing their free-to-play games. So I think that's what we're going to see. I mean, it's right now we are. I don't think we're not out of the MMO era. There's a lot of companies
No.
out there making small ones. We've seen the Korean titles they're still big into it. A lot of Kickstarter games for games out there waiting for them to come out. Whether it's Star Citizen, Crowfall, Camelot Unchained, Ashes of Creation, even though the now defunct Chronicles of Illyria, New World, Sea of Titans, Ship of Heroes. I mean, there are a lot, and there are more coming out all the time. So they're just not big. They're just not big. That's all. So that's fine.
Well, but I mean, I would be hard pressed to not call New World. I mean, it's Amazon, dude. It's
Well,
like that's
that might be considered a AAA game, okay, coming out because
yeah.
it's a big studio, but they don't have a track record. I mean, you could argue that Amazon's behind them, but would you call them a big studio, or would you call them a small one, or medium maybe?
I mean,
I
they
don't know.
do probably medium. I mean, if you're talking about exclusively their studio, is working on that game, yeah,
Hit by definition. That's all.
yeah, I think by definition it would be medium. And that's maybe stretching it
Yeah.
because I mean,
Well,
I think we're in a drought as far as there have been a lot of promise games and there's a lot being worked on, but nothing's really came out and been successful. I think maybe that's where you would come up with the word drought. That we are. You just mentioned a whole bunch of them. I would even throw
Not out yet.
Pantheon in there.
Hit by then too.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many that are just they're being worked on, and we don't know. It may be another 5 years before we see some of them.
Yep.
You know, some of them may never come out, unfortunately. But I, yeah, I really need. It makes me want to look it up now because I think Solomon is correct that there have been big studio games that have came out, and I'm just being a knucklehead right
Yeah.
now and not coming up with them.
This leads into where we have completed our storyline quest. We gave you a good story.
Check out the further adventures of Kennethan by liking and subscribing and watching me live on twitch.tv/Kennethan.